Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be with you on this Monday morning. This morning I'm sitting around our dining room table in our garden room. Around this table, over the last many years since we've been living here, we've had so many great times. We've shared meals together with lots of friends and family. We've laughed. We've celebrated birthdays, Christmas, many occasions where we've sat round this table that I'm sitting round now, and we have enjoyed great food, fun and fellowship together. I don't know about you, but there's something about sitting around a table with friends and family. It's often a time where you really share deep conversation, where you have those moments that you remember for maybe many years to come, and this is no exception. I can remember some of the best meals we've had sitting around this table. Today, at the beginning of this Holy Week, this Easter week, we're going to be doing devotions every single day right through to Friday, and each day we're going to be looking at an aspect of the week leading up to the death and the resurrection of Jesus, as we as Christians begin to celebrate what Easter means to us. And the reason that I'm sitting around our dining room table today is because I want to focus on the Last Supper. The Last Supper is called that because it was the last meal that Jesus had around a table with his disciples before his death and resurrection. And there are a few things about that meal that are very, very significant. 3 of the Gospels record the meal, and then Paul talks about that in Corinthians. The meal, the Last Supper, was to celebrate the Passover. The Passover was the beginning of the Jewish holidays, where many friends would gather together, and families certainly would gather together, and they would retell the story that went way back to the book of Exodus in the Bible. That time when God delivered his people from the captivity and bondage of the Egyptians, and he set them free by using Moses to take them from Egypt. And they would have special foods, and they would say special prayers, and they would read special readings to celebrate centuries on the remembering and the retelling of the story of the Passover. So Jesus here is having the Passover meal as the Last Supper before his death. I don't know if you like art, but Leonardo da Vinci famously painted the Last Supper in 1495. The Last Supper is a really significant moment, and I want to read a few verses from the Gospel of Mark something that Jesus did when he was sitting around that table with his disciples. So let's just read a few verses from Mark's Gospel, chapter 14, verses 22 to 24. It says this: that while they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it, and he gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take it, this is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them as well, and they all drank from it. And he said these words: "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many." And those were the words that Jesus spoke to his disciples as they celebrated this meal together, this Last Supper before his death. He took the bread and he broke it, just like I have a piece of bread here. And he gave it to them, and he said, "Take, eat, this is my body broken for you." And in the same way, he took the cup and he got them to drink it, and he said, "This is my blood of the new covenant." I find it fascinating that Jesus was willing to take the bread and to give it to his disciples. He was willing to take the cup and to symbolically use these two aspects of a meal that were often drunk and eaten around the table, and use them to tell them about his death and his resurrection. And he said, "This is my body broken for you. This is my sacrifice. This is my blood that's going to be shed for you." Here's something that I really found fascinating this last weekend, and that's this: That meal was surrounded by all sorts of awful things, really. In some ways, you could say it was not a meal to celebrate. Sitting around that table was Judas, who was about to betray his Lord. Sitting around that table was Peter, who in a few days was going to deny that he even knew Jesus. Sitting around that table were all the disciples who would flee from Jesus once they knew that he was going to be taken by the Romans. And of course, sitting around that table was Jesus himself, who knew all of those things that I've just mentioned. He knew that Judas would betray him. He knew that Peter would deny him. He knew that he was going to go to the cross and suffer a horrific death. And yet, in all of those things, all the backdrop of that meal, knowing all of those things, Jesus still said to his disciples, "This is my body broken for you. This is my blood shed for you." Isn't that amazing? You know, the communion meal is often referred to as a means of grace, a time where we break bread and we drink from the cup and we receive forgiveness. We receive mercy. We receive grace and we receive hope. We receive everything that Jesus offers to us through his broken body and through his shed blood. It's absolutely amazing that God knows all about us. He knows ahead of time when we will let him down. He knows when we will sin. He knows the brokenness of our lives. He knows the frailty of our thinking. He knows the way we doubt. He knows the way we lack faith. He knows all of those things, and yet he still offers this meal of grace to us. He still offers to us the communion meal. He still offers us grace, forgiveness, mercy and hope. And so today, as we begin this Easter week, I want to encourage you to remember, but not just to remember, but to receive. That whatever is going on in your life, whether you feel that you are in a season where your faith is shallow at the moment or it's struggling, whether you feel like you've let the Lord down and you are not living in the way that you maybe should, and we're all like that at times, Jesus still offers us the grace of the communion meal. Somebody once said that grace stands for God's riches at Christ's expense. And at Christ's expense, he offers us this beautiful meal of communion. And so he did with his disciples at that Last Supper. So let's remember today that Jesus knows all that's going on in our lives, but he still offers us this beautiful meal of communion, this great meal of grace. May God bless you today. Enjoy this Easter week and let us celebrate together what Jesus has done for us.